48? Yes, okay, perfect. Let's put that
Good
there.
evening, ladies and gentlemen.
We'll put that.
Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Committee of Adjustment. This is a meeting to consider applications for minor variance and consent held under the authority of the Planning Act of Ontario. Please keep in mind the intent of this process is to review the proposal that is before us, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, and organizations. If a request for a deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the committee, after consultation with the Secretary-Treasurer, will set a new hearing date. No further notice will be provided unless there are changes to the application. In order to conduct an effective and efficient hearing, we have adopted the following process. The owner or authorized agent will be given the opportunity, if so desired, to briefly explain to us the basis of the application and answer any questions that may arise out of the hearing. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for this presentation. We need you to state the full name and address for the record. Any materials submitted to the committee for viewing will remain the property of this committee. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All persons attending the hearing who wish to support or oppose an application must also state the full name and address for the record. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided to make a presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chairperson of the committee. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will also be at the discretion of the committee. If there are several speakers sharing the same point of view, we do ask that you choose a spokesperson to present the group's opinion. We are happy to hear all the interested parties' opinions. However, covering the same points will not advance your case. The owner or agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to the committee, to comments made by any interested parties and answer any questions from the committee members. If the owner or agent has any concerns found in staff reports, particularly with any proposed conditions, this will be the opportunity for you to advise us. The matter will then be taken into committee for a decision, and this will mark the end of the discussion. Once the committee makes an oral decision, any person desiring a copy must file with the Secretary-Treasurer at this meeting a written request for notice of the decision. A green sheet is provided for this purpose in the back of the room. Please note that you must make a written request in order to be included on the list that is used for the local planning appeal tribunal for the giving of any subsequent notice of any appeal. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed no later than 10 days for minor variances and 15 days for consent applications. The applicant, the owner, an agent, and any other person who has filed a written request for such a notice will then be notified. If you do not agree with the committee's decision, you may appeal this to the local planning appeal tribunal, and the last day to appeal the decision will be noted on the decision. If no appeal is received within the prescribed time frame, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding, and the Secretary-Treasurer will then notify the applicant through written correspondence. People attending this committee meeting are to be courteous to and respectful of the members of the committee, town staff, and other people in attendance tonight. Tonight's meeting will be video recorded and available for future viewing on the town's YouTube channel, and we do ask that you maintain your cellular phones and pagers on silent, if not switched off during this meeting, as they do tend to interfere with the audio system. Thank you. So we do not have any regrets for this evening. Do we have any declaration of pecuniary interests? I see none. Thank you, gentlemen. At this time, I'll take requests for deferral or withdrawal of any applications. I see none. Thank you. We do not have any consent applications, so we will start with the first item on our agenda, which is CAV 125 of 2018 at 1332 Elgin Crescent. Good evening.
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Bill Outred. My address is 2140 Winston Park Drive, unit number 28, Oakville.
Thank you, Mr. Outred. Is there anyone here for CAV 125 of 2018 at 1332 Elgin Crescent? I see none. For the benefit of everyone in the audience, Mr. Outred is a seasoned veteran before our committee. We do have the ability through our bylaw to forego on the presentation. Mr. Outred, do you have anything further to add in terms of, you've read the report, you're familiar with the proposed condition? It's your time to do so now if you so choose.
Thank you, Madam Chair, but I've read the report and I'm support of the comments. I have nothing further to add unless the committee has any questions.
Perfect. Are there any questions of Mr. Altrud at this time? I see none. If we are ready to take this matter into committee, I'm ready for a motion. Mr. Charlebois, thank you.
Madam Chair, thank you. This is a relatively simple one. Having conducted my site visit and reviewed the applicant's written submission as well as the town's written staff report, and noting that the town is in support of this application. Also taking into account that there are no written or oral objections or letters of support from the public. I'm prepared to put forward a motion to accept this application as presented, finding it does meet the 4 tests under the Planning Act, making it subject to 2 conditions. One, that the approval will expire 2 years from the date of this decision if the proposed development does not proceed or a building permit is not issued, and also subject to the condition that the proposed addition be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated May 25th, 2018 as submitted.
Very well. Is there a discussion on these recommendations? I see none. Thank you. All those in support of the recommendation to pass the application? Thank you. Okay, the application has been approved. Thank you, Mr. Altrud. I see you are next again on our agenda. Let me just canvass the room. It's for CAV 126 of 2018 at 351 Spruce Street. Is there anyone here for CAV 126 at 351 Spruce Street? You are. Sir, are you here in opposition or support? Okay. We do have 1 letter of objection on record. That might perhaps be yours. Mr. Altrud will have you take us through the application, and then we will have the gentleman speak and address the committee.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Does the overhead work? Oh, there we go. Perfect. Okay, yes, thank you. I am the agent for this application as well at 351 Spruce Street. What we're looking for today is, I know the sound is horrible in this in the atrium. What we're looking for today is 2 variances in relation to an addition to the existing house. We're looking for a minimum flankage of, 2.49 meters. The flankage is more or less the setback that I'm showing right now with the pen. 3.5 meters is required in the bylaw. Just to address this first, the existing house basically has the exact same footprint. So what I've indicated here, and it's really difficult to see, but in yellow is the existing house. In green is the proposed addition. The existing house is being retrofitted with a full 2nd floor. However, the setback remains the same for that flankage. So we are asking once again for 2.49 meters, 3.5 meters is required in the bylaw. I don't believe there's any issues pertaining to that particular item. This is a built area. There is existing nonconformities within the street. Certainly what we're proposing is a reasonable proposal, so I'll just put the overhead of the actual front elevation. So you can see that it's a relatively reasonable proposal as far as massing and character is concerned, very fitting for the actual composure of the existing street. The second variance we're asking for is lot coverage. The lot coverage we're requesting is 23.15%. The bylaw requirement is 19%. My comments are more or less the same. What we're proposing is a very reasonable plan. It's more or less taking the existing, and what we're doing is adding a 1-car garage, as well as an area for the mudroom, sitting area on the 1st floor, as well as bedrooms above. We're also adding a covered porch and an uncovered porch. The extent of the existing 1-story portion of the house is actually further than what is proposed. That portion of the home is actually being taken down. The existing coverage on this property, I believe, is about 20.23%, I believe. So we're asking for 3% more. Out of that differential, so basically just converting it to meters squared, what we are permitted is 104 meters squared. We are 127 meters squared. Out of that, probably 13.36 meters squared is actually the proposed front and covered porch. So when you actually deduct the covered porches, which are obviously important, it gives the character, some character to the home and to the architectural design, we're actually about 114 meters squared. So about 10 meters squared over for the actual floor area coverage of the house. And speaking to the floor area, we are below the floor space index. There's no variance proposed for that. We're also not asking for any variances for height or any other setback variances, so strictly just the coverage and the flankage. I did speak to the neighbor today who had some concerns. I'll let him speak to the concerns. One of the concerns indicated in his letter is the trees. There are 3 trees to be removed to facilitate the new driveway. There's 2 smaller trees indicated here, and then there's a larger blue spruce tree, which I've just confirmed today that the tree is entirely on the private property. However, this, of course, has to go through the site alterations permit process. Through that process, they will determine if they want to see that tree maintained. If they do want to see the tree maintained, the 15-meter setback from the Allen center line of road is right here. There is an ability to actually move the driveway to go around the blue spruce. We'll leave it up to the site alterations process to determine whether or not that'll be necessary. As the committee knows, if it's an oak or a maple or a tree of significance, typically they want to see it maintained as much as possible. A blue spruce isn't, I don't think, the A list of trees essentially, but we are willing to work with them to see what's necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Alfred. Are there any questions at this time? Yeah. Are there any questions of Mr. Alfred? No, there aren't. If you'd be kind enough to just leave the drawings on the table, and the Secretary Treasurer will, yeah. Sir, you can proceed to speak to the committee, and you can share your concerns. Your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, my name is Sheldon Duff at 347 Spruce Street, which is just west of this property.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I must say it's almost impossible to hear anything being said.
Unfortunately, this is the card that we've been dealt until the construction is completed. We're in as much pain as you are.
Okay. I've given you a written submission with some pictures.
Do have it on record.
Right. I mean, my principal objection is the new driveway, well, the single-car garage and a new driveway which accesses Spruce Street results in the taking down of 3 trees, one of which is it's a 14-foot Colorado spruce tree, which is tree number 3. And I understand there was an arborist report completed, which I just received late this afternoon. So my principal objection is those trees coming down. I've lived in this house since 1994. There's lots of trees in the neighborhood. Just looking around the neighborhood, I don't know of too many other houses that are that close together. And secondly, given the nature of this property, it's a long rectangular property. The residents of the house and have never really, even the previous owner, I think the existing owner, have never really used the front door on Spruce Street as an operating door. They just don't use it. It would appear to me that it would make a lot more sense to make use of this property as a long rectangle and configure the house to conform to the nature of the property. And if it wanted to extend the house, possibly do it towards the back. I understand the plan is to take down an existing garage, or one could simply put a garage at the back of the house, or alternatively if one wants to keep the garage as conforming to this plan, put the entrance to the garage at the back of the house rather than the front of the house, therefore those trees would not have to come down. There is a driveway currently accessing Allen Street towards the back of the property and a garage back there. One could, potentially just do an L-shaped driveway and have the entrance to the garage at the back of the property rather than the front.
Thank you, sir. While we appreciate your submissions, you can imagine the length and the procedure that goes into designing a home and catering to the property, and they work really close with the planning committee to do so. So the only thing before us right now is the variances for the flankage, which is the side, and the actual lot coverage. Because these trees fall on property that is not municipally owned, they actually have a right to take them down, but as you heard Mr. Aldred say, they will be going through a site planning process. If the arborists and the town wants to see the trees maintained, then they will require that they change the direction of the driveway. Until that site planning process is completed, there's not really much that we as a committee can do to change that. We have to look at the plans that are set before us and the variances that are requested based on these plans. And that's why the site planning process takes advantage of all these issues, trees and drainage and so forth. That's really where the nook and cranny of these things happen. And since you're in the actual, I guess, 100-meter radius, you will be getting a notification for that. So you'll be able to voice your opinion at that time as well.
Sorry, so there's a second process to deal with other issues, including trees.
Yes, there is.
And what is that process called?
Sorry? No, I mean, like if you still have an issue after they've completed their site plan process, you can go through and speak to the arborists and the people in the town. And yeah, site alteration.
Okay. All right.
Are there any questions of Mr. Duff at this time? Sorry, staff. Staff has a comment. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to clarify, this particular property is subject to a site alteration process. There is no public engagement as part of that. It's an engineering type review, which does still go through the review of trees, grading, and drainage. It is not subject to a planning site plan application, which would have seen that public review. But I would echo the same comments in that that site alteration process will evaluate the trees and will dictate whether or not the driveway should be realigned to accommodate any trees, and we'll also look at grading and drainage and the closure of the redundant driveway at the rear off of Allen.
Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. Sorry, before you go, are there any questions of Mr. Duff from the committee? I see none. Thank you, sir, for your submission. Mr. Duff, Mr. Outred will actually comment right now based on your comments. So the hearing is not over. If you'd like to attend, then just.
No, I'll just add. Once again, I appreciate the neighbor getting in touch with me today. I did provide him with the arborist report when I received the copy late in the afternoon. So, as I said, we will review it through the site alterations process. Just as a note, the reason why the house is configured with the driveway on Spruce Street now, as opposed to the driveway here, and this is the existing garage that's being demolished. The owners would like to have a decent amenity space, rear yard amenity space, and if you have the driveway here, their amenity space is on the corner. They're looking to do something rather conventional. As you can see from the house design that I presented earlier, it is a very conventional looking home. So it's really about what they want as far as their living space, amenity space, with the porches and so forth. So I appreciate the neighbors' comments, but we are proceeding with the plan as is.
Thank you, and I hope that serves a bit of more clarification to the neighbor. Are there any questions of Mr. Outred, or are we prepared to take this into committee? I see none. So if you're satisfied with the proposed conditions, we will take this matter into committee. Okay.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Flemington, thank you.
having conducted my site visit and reviewed the applicant's written submission, as well as the town's written staff report, which is in support of, also having taken into account the comments presented by the applicant this evening, as well as the questions and submissions from the public, and noting that there was one written and one oral objection from the public, commenting with regards to the landscaping and the trees of the that are going to be removed, but not on the actual variances that have been requested. I am prepared to make a motion in support of approval of the application as submitted, and noting that on the following conditions. One being that the proposed additions be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated July 2018 as submitted. And the other one being that the proposed dwelling be constructed, that subject to the condition that the approval will expire 2 years from the date of the decision if the proposed development does not proceed or a building permit is not issued.
Thank you, Mr. Flemington. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is CAV 102 of 2018. This was deferred from July 10th. It's at 448 Drummond Road. Oh, hi, you're on this side. I was looking on this
Sorry
side.
about
That's okay.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, actually the mic on this side is much better. I think we'll make everyone else go there.
I knew that, that's why.
Good job.
My name is Lincoln Lowe. I am the planner representing the applicant for the minor variance application before you this evening. I'm with Malone Given Parsons.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Lowe, right?
Yep.
Okay, let me just canvass the room. Who is here for application CAV 102 of 2018 at 448 Drummond Road? Show of hands, please. Thank you. I'm assuming you're all in opposition? Correct. You're in support? No, you're in opposition because you give me the thumbs up. Okay. I will give you all the chance to speak to the committee. If one or more of you know each other and you share point of view, perhaps you can kind of pool those opinions. If not, then we'll take our time. It's not a problem. Mr. Lowe, go ahead with your presentation, and then we'll invite the members of the audience to participate.
Thank you. Good evening, members of committee. The application before you this evening is seeking a total of 4 variances to facilitate the construction of a new 2-story single detached dwelling on a lot at 448 Drummond Road. The lot is located in southeastern Oakville and fronts onto Drummond, which runs northeast or southwest. The diagonal nature of Drummond creates a row of irregular lots. The surrounding community is one that is in transition. The newer builds are larger 1.5 to 2-story buildings, which have replaced the pre-existing bungalows. The dwelling in question this evening is one of the few remaining bungalows in the area. Before going into detail about the variances, I think it might be useful to just very briefly discuss the policy context that's subject to this site. As per the town zoning bylaw, the site is split zoned. The RL3-0 residential zone occupies the front portion of the lot. The N natural area zone occupies the rear portion. The lower Wedgewood Creek runs to the west of the lot, and it is within Conservation Halton's regulation limit. As such, the rear portion of the lot is within Conservation Halton's floodplain setback limit, which you can see here, which traverses a portion of the rear portion of this lot. The floodplain and associated setback actually runs across many of the lots across Drummond. Sometimes the limit occupies half of the existing house, sometimes the entire house is within the setback limit. Through this process, the applicant has worked with Conservation Halton, and they have indicated that they could permit the new dwelling as proposed, so as long as the rear western exterior wall doesn't encroach further into the setback. Essentially, what the Conservation Authority has done is they set the rear development limit of this lot as what is existing today. This variance application was originally before committee on July 10th, where it was deferred following staff concerns so that the applicant could work and improve the application. The application before you this evening has been revised and has improved on a number of the requested variances and is now requesting 4 variances as opposed to the original 5. The 4 variances that are being requested are maximum lot coverage, maximum residential floor area ratio, minimum front yard setback, as well as the maximum private garage projection. While the maximum residential floor area ratio, as per the table in front of you, appears to have increased from the original application, this is a bit of a technicality in that the garage space is included in the revised application, whereas garage space was not included in the original. Town zoning noted that when a garage exceeds 6 meters in height, the entire area of the garage is included in residential floor area. The proposed concept has a pitched garage. There's a very small portion of the garage that extends above 6 meters. As such, the area is included. If you were to not include the garage area, much like the original application, you will see that the revised application has actually been reduced by about 30 square meters of actual living space. That's about 300 square feet. In response to town concern that the proposed dwelling was overbuilt. There has been considerable effort to try to propose an application that responds to staff concern, as well as respect the character of the neighborhood. With regards to the variance, I will begin with the maximum lot coverage and a maximum residential FAR variances, as they are linked to the split zoning. Upon review of the application, town zoning instructed that only the RL3-0 zone can be used as the site area when calculating both lot coverage and maximum floor area ratio. As you can see in this case, it essentially cuts the site, essentially removes a third of the site from the site area calculations. As mentioned earlier, the applicant has worked with the Conservation Authority to ensure that the siting of the house has no negative impacts to the floodplain hazard to the rear. So in this situation, I actually do agree with town planning's approach in that it is appropriate to consider the entire site area to calculate coverage and floor area ratio. Using this approach, the coverage variance would be removed as the building footprint is only 22.3% of the lot area, where 35% is permitted. It's about the same thing with the residential floor area ratio. If you were to use the entire site, the request drops from 67.99% to 41.7%, where 42% is permitted. It reduces even further if you were to remove the garage area from the calculation, much like the original application. And as you can see, it'll drop to 36.9%, where again 42% is permitted. With regards to both those variances, I just want to do a brief snapshot of what the area and the community looks like around 448 Drummond. You'll see from the aerial, 448 Drummond is indicated, and you can see that the building footprint that is existing, it is one of the smallest in the community and the smallest on Drummond Road as it exists today. These footprints were taken from the town's open data website. We simply just calculated the area. You could argue that the house as it exists today is, prior to the variance, is out of character with the neighborhood, which consists mostly of larger 1.5 and 2-story homes. This is the same slide with the revised footprint. I don't know if you can see that, the revised footprint provided. You can see it doesn't look out of character with the other footprints in the area. We did put a brief calculation on this. In terms of lot coverage and floor area ratio, the existing house is one of the smallest, and the proposed house would move it roughly to the middle of the pack of what is already existing in the neighborhood. With regards to the front yard setback provision, the aforementioned conservation Halton hazard limit to the rear forces any proposed reconstruction on this lot to move forward, because you can't move backward. So,
Mr. Lowe, sorry to interrupt you, but your 5 minutes are up. I'll give you another minute.
yeah,
Okay.
that'd be great.
Thank you.
As you can see, the proposed dwelling will be sited closer to the street. It'll have more prominence. And the current setback is almost, the current existing house, the setback is almost 10 meters from the property line, 16 meters from the road. So it is quite set back. The proposed siting of the new dwelling achieves a consistent streetscape pattern and is set back sufficiently to have cars parked completely on the driveway out of the public right-of-way. In our discussions with planning staff, there was a mutual agreement that the importance of the front yard setback provision is to maintain the streetscape pattern along Drummond Road, whereas the original concept of the house proposed to be sited almost completely in line with 452. The application has been revised, the house depth has been reduced, and you can see that 448 now sits completely behind 452 and completely in front of 444, which maintains the pattern that existed prior to the variance. It should also be noted that the front yard setback request is really just to accommodate a pinch point in the lot area, as you can see there. As you move north, the lot tapers away, and the front yard condition actually improves. The final variance is for the garage projections. It is for a 2.16 meter projection where 1.5 meters is permitted. This policy is typically included to reduce the garage kind of domination of the front elevation, and I think that the way that they've done it in terms of kind of staggering the garage, it actually is a very unique architectural feature and is actually quite nice on the building. Projections like this also already exist in the neighborhood, many appearing well beyond 1.5 meters. So this is just the front elevation. As you can see the garage is a bit staggered. As you can see, the garage is pitched, so it's about 6 meters. This is the rear elevation, north elevation, and south elevation. The north and south elevation has had some back and forth with town planning to improve urban design elements to mitigate visual impacts to the adjacent properties. And I think that's about it. In conclusion, I think it passes all 4 tests of a minor variance. I think it's good planning, and I agree with staff's report on the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. Are there any questions of Mr. Lowe at this time from the committee? I see none, so we'll invite, who would like to address the committee first? Do you have any thing to display on the, okay, so then if I can ask you to come to that side, because it sounds much better. Thank you kindly. Your name and address for the record.
My name is Derek Johnston. I'm at 439 Drummond. Not directly across the road, but nearly.
Mr. Johnson, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I was listening closely to the agent for the applicant, and I see they have made quite a few adjustments to the plan. I think most of the people in the area are mostly concerned about 2 points. The 2 points are that the house next door will essentially be looking at the entire side of one home out its front window. So I think the way the house is designed, yes, they've used the back of the current home, but the current home is not very deep. The new home would be really deep in comparison. And so the people that live in that home are going to have like basically a wall, for almost the entire length of the property going forward. So the back of the house terminates before the front of the house next door. And if you have a chance to see their house, it's got a big bay window right in that corner. So if you're sitting anywhere in their house or looking out the window, you're looking at a solid wall the whole length of their front yard. And because the house goes so close to the road, it literally is a solid wall for the entire length of the property line almost. That's, I think, the biggest thing. And I do see they've made some adjustments to the plan that tried to bring the front of the home back. That's great. The road, is not flat there. So even though the house is behind the house on the north side, the road still is on an angle. So it's still quite a bit more forward than the house next door. I've lived in the area for almost 9 years. I tend to walk all the streets. There is no other example in the area of an offset like that, none that I've seen. The comments about the house being appropriately sized and appropriately designed for that area is true. However, it's just simply the placement of it and what the people in the house next door, who unfortunately couldn't make it tonight, would be looking at. I'm across the street. It doesn't affect me tremendously. However, it will change the look and feel of that neighborhood completely, because it won't look like the area that we moved into. There will be basically, you're driving down the road and there's this giant wall in the middle of nowhere, which wouldn't be seen on any other street in any other direction. I think those are the two big concerns. Am I right? Okay. Okay.
Are there any questions of Mr. Johnson at this time? Mr. Charlebois.
Just in trying to clarify
Yeah.
some things, we've been told that the back of the building is pretty much fixed by the Conservation Authority in
I
terms
just
of
heard that. Yeah, I
redeveloping
hadn't heard
this.
that before.
Yeah. So they've pretty much built about as wide as they can. So really the only way they can pull back from here is to make the building smaller.
Yeah.
I do note that you said that you thought the size of the building on its own, without taking into account that, seems to be fine. I noticed just in looking at the drawings and when I drove the site, the same thing is, I think almost every neighbor faces this same problem. You've got the house, the next one's set back, the next one's set back, the next one's set back. So they're all kind of looking at a wall, and I get it. I just don't know how to solve it.
Yeah.
I guess is really what's the big thing in front of me. But
Sure.
so I just wanted to clarify from your point of view that you understand those constraints. You understand that they, if they could go back, they probably would, but they can't. They can't go sideways, so the only way they can go is forwards. And I guess what's in front of us here is what's the appropriate compromise. I just want to know if you appreciated that stance.
Yeah. Well, hate to say this because everybody teases me about it, but I'm an engineer by training, and so I'm really good at that spatial component and the way that it's laid out, and I have an appreciation for that. And yeah, it's a tough situation on that lot. There's no question. I think there's two houses in the area which are probably the most magnification of that. One is between. There's one just around the corner on Aereo where there's a brand new house beside a bungalow that was adjusted, was renovated, and I'm on 439 on the corner. On the opposite corner to me and the house beside it, there's the same thing. But in both of those cases, the home, even if you look at the house, two houses south of the property in question and the people right next door, even between those two homes, the difference is probably maybe 15 feet, of structure difference. And so for the most part, when you're looking out a window or whatever, if you go forward 15 feet on a lot that size, your view, you still have of view. And even though it's in your view, it doesn't dominate your view. In this case, the people would be sitting, and no matter where they are in their window, they've got a wall that will block out the sun and everything to their left completely. That's it.
And I'm not disagreeing with you. That part I do get. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yes, thank you very much. We'll ask the other neighbors if they'd like to speak. So who would like to address the committee?
Hi, Heinz Vogt, 458 Drummond.
Sorry, you need to speak into the mic. I apologize, we can't hear you.
Sorry, Heinz Vogt.
Einsvold, okay.
Yes, 458 Drummond.
458 Drummond, okay.
458 Drummond.
Okay.
My issue is in reviewing the drawings that were provided in support of the application. There appear to be a number of discrepancies between the plan and the revised urban design strategies. And I wanted to ask staff to have a look at whether a variance is required for the south setback to the adjacent property. In the process of manipulating the south facade, they've seemed to have pulled a portion of the living room, or whatever room that is, at the southeast corner out closer to the property line. And I'm not sure whether that extension complies with the bylaw or not. Secondly, I think it would be useful to have a schedule prepared for the various setbacks. The document that's before you for an approval only states the minimum setback, but the minimum setback is a condition of a series of setbacks along the frontage that are shown on the drawing. So I wonder if it's possible to have a schedule attached to your decision to ensure that all of those various setback adjustments are in fact captured in the final building, since there's no site plan approval process and your decision will govern. So the concern that I have is if you approve 4.52 meters as the minimum setback, in my opinion, there'd be nothing stopping the proponent from moving any of the walls closer to the street, other than the wall for the garage. So I would recommend, or I'd like to see a schedule attached to your decision that shows all of those setbacks.
We'll have the planner comment on your questions, but what I'll have you know is that any approved variances are tied to our drawings, so there is no way that they can move a wall, not an inch, without it being known.
I do not believe that the drawing is correct. The
Well-
elevations and the site plan do not match each other.
Okay, well, we'll have the applicant respond to your comments. In the meantime, I think Ms. Mahalovich has some comments of her own, given your questions. So, sorry, I apologize. That was her maiden name, my bad.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To respond to the questions raised, as you had indicated, any approval provided by this committee are subject to the condition that staff have recommended, which would provide for the drawings that, as submitted for today's hearing, are appended to that decision. And any deviation at a building permit stage from this these set of plans would trigger the possible return of an application to the committee for their consideration. With respect to the drawings themselves and their correspondence with the appropriate zoning regulations, town zoning staff have reviewed this application and have provided for the appropriate variances as listed. There are no interior side yard setbacks being requested at this point. I will, however, point out that projections into the prescribed side yards are permitted for certain architectural features, such as fireplaces or sills or things like that, which it appears would be the case for the projection off of the front of southern portion of the house, but I will let the applicant describe perhaps in more detail what that feature is. But I imagine those conversations have happened with our zoning group, and those issues have been confirmed to acknowledge that that is in fact an allowable projection. And I believe that these plans as submitted are correct and do match the corresponding elevations for what this committee would be making a decision on this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Colburn. I hope that that has answered your questions, Mr. Volt, and the applicant will speak more to these concerns when he gets his turn back at the podium.
I would like the applicant to speak to this elevation provided in the document
Certainly,
against this plan provided in the document.
certainly. Thank you. If you can just leave them there, it'll be a heads up for him when he gets back to the podium. Okay, given these submissions, if there are any points that have not been raised that you'd like to raise at this time, I invite the remaining neighbors who have not had a chance to speak to come to the podium and voice their concerns. So everyone's concerns have been related? All right, Mr. Lowe, it's your chance to respond to the neighbors. So we have several things that are on, I hope.
With regard to the first gentleman who came up to speak, I do understand what he's saying in terms of the placement of the houses in front and behind. But as was discussed in front of committee, there really is a fixed point to the back. I do think that if that hazard area was not there, it would be ideally he could move the house back, but in this case he can't. In terms of achieving that pattern of one in front, one in the back, I still think that that is what is achieved here today with the proposal in front of you, and I do think that and I agree with town planning staff that was what was important in terms of trying to keep the streetscape pattern. I will say that there was a lot of back and forth with town staff and the architect, the project architect who is here today, on improvements that they could make to that south elevation to make sure that any visual impacts would be mitigated as much as possible. So I know that elevation for sure has gone through a bunch of back and forth. I will also note that in terms of, I'm sure you guys have gone to the area, that the lots are large, the houses are large, and the side yard setbacks in this case are also quite large. There is, I grew up in Scarborough. Our houses are right beside each other, so I could understand if that was the case. But there's probably, I would imagine at the minimum 2.4 meters separating those houses, and likely more, and to mitigate that visual impact. In terms of the plans not drawing, I've seen a lot of these plans for this application. I cannot remember if what I'm looking at is what was submitted, but I will defer to Kate on what she had mentioned earlier, that these drawings had been reviewed by town zoning, they had been reviewed by town urban design, and I was told that they match. So that's in terms of what's matching and what's not, that's the best I can do, and like what was mentioned before, what is built has to match what is approved. There is no, I'm going to show you a plan and build something else. One has to match the other. So I have the utmost confidence that should this be approved, what is built will be what's in front of you.
Mr. Volt had left two
Yes.
drawings, the elevation, and I guess if you need to project, you'd have to come to this side so you can explain them to him.
Give me 1 second. Oh.
Yeah, just, sure.
It's better for everyone's, I guess, edification if we did that in public. And then if Mr. Volt, you can take his seat, you can just show him and then take his seat, and then he'll address the committee.
If you wouldn't mind, I will defer to the project architect on this one. 'cause
Okay,
he's very
that's
familiar.
fine. If we can have the name of the architect and name and address for the record. Okay, you have that, okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
Shows two projections. And on this side shows one projection for each of the others. This is this elevation. This is this elevation.
that's not, this is not.
It's not a projection. Only different material to remain the same. Will not be projected. That's why I tried to show that.
Mr. Al-Rawi, the committee would like to hear your response. So if you can repeat the question and then give us your answer, because this is an open panel that we all need to understand what the question being posed is and the answer being delivered.
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, the question is that if you...
And you need to use the mic. I apologize. If that's not working, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So the question is, we have in this west elevation, it shows in the site plan or the plan 2 setbacks. It's not very clear here, but here it shows setback, and here shows no setback. While in the elevation, this shows a setback and another setback here. Actually, this is not a setback. This is only a change of material as discussed with the town to make sure that this elevation is articulated and looks as much as good as we can to the neighbors. And because this is the side which will be shown to everybody, this part of the street. The only problem we have is we had to follow the Ontario Building Code with 1.2 meter setback. We are limited with the sizes of the windows. So instead of the windows, we played with the material. We added more stone. The town asked for articulation for that. So this may be confused a little bit because of it shows like it's a setback. No, it's not a setback. It's not encroachment into the side.
Thank you, sir, for your submission. Are there any questions of Mr. Rawi at this time?
What is the projection of this element that you said is a projection?
You have the floor plan,
I do not have the floor plan. It wasn't provided in the...
Yeah, they don't receive the floor plans.
No.
The first floor, second floor plan.
That was not provided on the website,
I mean,
so I have no idea.
we have it on our presentation.
That information was not provided
What do you want to show?
on the site.
We have the floor plans or no? No, we don't have it here.
Ms. Coburn, you have a comment?
Through you, Madam Chair, floor plans are not provided publicly as they are considered more sensitive material when considering public applications in this process. They are provided for the building department's purposes to, again, assess the need or of the presence of certain allowable projections for sills, balconies, if there are fireplaces, et cetera. They're not something that's made public. I think for the purposes of what's being considered here today, the elevations are what is considered public for anybody to respond to.
Okay.
So may I just ask whether this element...
Volt, Mr. Volt, I have entertained all your questions. I think that as where we stand right now, I think we can ascertain that the drawings submitted have been checked by the town. They have been checked against elevations as well as the bylaw. If you have further questions, I'd ask you to kindly speak to the architect or the applicant's representative after the session has completed, and they, I think, will be more than happy to explain to you in private should they choose to share the floor plans with yourself. Thank you, sir. Are there any further questions of Mr. Lowe? Committee members, are we prepared to take this matter into committee? Mr. Lowe, have you given all your submission? Is there anything further that you'd like to add? You are familiar with the conditions that we have on record? Yep. Okay. Any questions? Mr. Hardcastle, I see you nodding.
So I'm not completely satisfied that we've addressed this issue. I think I'm looking at these drawings and I hadn't noted it in my previous review, but I don't think the projection, I don't have enough information here to be satisfied that this projection is consistent across these drawings. I'm a little bit concerned because the, excuse me, the east elevation drawing shows what appears to be a large window where the projection is shown on the floor plan. And I'm having a hard time reconciling that projection with the window opening, especially when you look at the floor plans, which I have the benefit of, which shows windows on either side of that projection on the main floor. No, the lower one in the bottom right-hand
this one
corner,
right
that one. So it appears on the floor plan drawings that there's a projection from that living room space there that isn't a window in that location on the floor plans, but it is shown as a window here.
Right. May I?
Yeah.
Through you,
Yes.
the chair. From what I heard just now, I do believe that on the site plan, on the, I would call it the south elevation. I think on the drawings it might be called the east elevation. I call it the south elevation. The site plan does have a jagged setback on that elevation. There's no, it's not a flush wall. So I think there is a recognition in those plans that yes, there is a, you call it projection, I would call it a setback on that elevation. What my understanding was that this element was causing a bit of confusion as it was not shown as a setback or a projection on the site plan, and that's because there actually is no setback or projection on the site plan for this, as this is actually just a material change and not a projection or a setback.
Mr. Hardcastle, do you have any further questions, or are you satisfied with the answer that the applicant has given?
I understand and can appreciate that the rear component shown there is a change in building material, but that front one, I'm still struggling with that. I'm still seeing an inconsistency between the floor plans, the elevation, and the site plan. So if somebody can take me through that, I'd really appreciate that.
So again, from Mr. Chairman.
Just speak into the mic, Mr. Alvar, please.
I mean, you can see from the front elevation, if there's any confusion, maybe in the drawings, it's clarified. This is actually what we are having here. If you go to see the side setback, this is the area where we are having the window or the bay window on the west side, which is well within the setbacks allowed by the zoning bylaw. We are not exceeding anything. So in case of anything that is not clearly shown, we confirm all these dimensions are correct, and they are per the requirement. The floor plan is the exact, the first floor plan is the exact plan, and this matches the elevations exactly. Unfortunately, I don't have it here on the presentation. So any encroachment will be only for the fireplace, and it will not be something that is require any further variances or any further changes.
Would you be kind enough to pull up the east elevation? Do you have the east elevation in that presentation?
Yeah.
So I call it the south.
So,
Yeah, it's
so
the west elevation.
that
yeah.
appears to be a window there in the bottom right-hand corner.
Where here?
Bottom right-hand corner. Yes, there.
Yes.
That's a window?
Yes.
Because your floor plan drawings don't show a window there. The floor plan drawings show windows flanking either side of a projection.
Okay. I've seen that. I have to come, to check with our drawings. Maybe there's some inconsistency here, because I see the floor plan doesn't show this window the same shape. I'm not 100% sure which one is the final one, but in any case, the elevations, this is what we want to show. These are the final ones. We'll update the floor plan if it's not matching the elevation. But again, this is not related to anything that will create an additional variance, for sure.
Well, and I think that's what we're trying to get to the bottom of, is understanding whether that projection is an allowable encroachment or represents a different side yard setback.
Yeah.
And depending upon what it is, if it's a chimney versus floor space down at the ground level, I think it would be interpreted differently under those two circumstances. And I think that's the nature of the inquiry here, and trying to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah. We can accept a condition to add to that this west side would not encroach any into the side yard rather than what is accepted, and then we will fix if there is a missing drawing or a mismatching in any drawing. Yeah, I think so.
Ms. Coburn, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the committee, if it's any assistance for the additional information, the zoning bylaw table 4.3, which speaks about allowable building and structure encroachments and projections, does allow for non-walk-in bay, box-out, and bow windows without foundations to a maximum width of 3 meters and a maximum height of 1 story. And it will also allow for chimney and gas fireplace projections as well as previously mentioned. These are allowed to encroach into the minimum yard of 0.6. So the yard that they're providing is 1.3 meters. The minimum requirements is 1.2 for that side, given the zone of the RL3-0 zone that they're in. They would be allowed to go in 0.6 from 1.2 for any projection. So the expectation from urban design was to see an enhanced treatment of the southerly elevation, the portion that would be more exposed to the street and to the properties to the south. It would be our expectation that the elevation as shown is what goes forward, should the applicant need to revise a floor plan to ensure that that encroachment is handled accordingly by being, again, either one of these bay windows. In terms of how it is defined by the bylaw, staff would be supportive of that moving forward, subject to a revised floor plan or site plan drawing to ensure that the appropriate setbacks are provided and or that the features, the projected features, are labeled accordingly.
Thank you, Mrs. Coburn. Do you have further questions, Mr. Hardcastle? Mr. Talowski? Oh, okay. Any, okay, seeing as though we have no questions, are we prepared to take this matter into committee? Mr. Talowski, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I have no issues supporting the variances that are in front of us tonight. I do believe that this house is not overbuilt for the neighborhood and fits the character, and I appreciate the comments made from the neighbors, but it's really a function of the angular design of the street and the conservation setback that's requiring the house to be projected out in front, and based on the drawings, yes, elevation drawings in front of us, this house will probably have the nicest side yard elevations of any non-corner lot. But there's always a but. Madam Chair, I don't believe we can approve this tonight, or I'm not willing to approve this tonight because we have a set of drawings that don't match. The applicant has clearly provided an old first floor elevation, or sorry, floor plan. Second floor plan seems to have been updated. The ground floor has not been updated, doesn't even show the bay window on the front elevation. It does on the second floor, not on the ground floor. I understand the comments from the applicant that the side yard are not projections, they're just changes in material, but that's not how the drawing reads to me. The way it's drawn, it really looks like those are projections. So, Madam Chair, until I have a set of drawings in front of me that actually match, I'm not willing to approve this, and I'm going to move that this application be deferred until we have a set of drawings in front of the committee that are actually represent what's being applied for.
Thank you, Mr. Towski. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Well, we usually take deferrals in the beginning, as you know, Mr. Lowe, but given the circumstances and the fact that the committee is uncomfortable making a recommendation based on the drawings that we have, I am going to entertain the idea of deferring this application again. It's better than denying it all completely, because that kind of puts us in a bind if you would like to proceed regardless of, but now that you've heard the committee, I think that that's the most prudent thing to do. Secretary Treasurer, when is the October 2nd is the earliest that we can get you back in, given that you can get all your drawings in and circulated in time. And there will be a $668.66 fee attached to that deferral.
Can I just ask a question? In terms of the process, let's say it's October 2nd, would I make the presentation again, or is there a...
Well, I mean, it's really hard to say, provided that your drawings they read well to the committee and the planners on the committee, the town staff, as well as the neighbors, and there aren't any neighbors present that would like to speak to the actual application. You might have a faster procedure. I mean, our bylaw allows us to forego the presentation if we're satisfied and you have no further comments, but I can't really give you a blank statement as to whether that would happen or not.
Understood.
So we're going to, are you agreeable to the deferral? Because your other option is for us to proceed with the application and let the cards fall and see who is going to support. I can't tell you who in the committee is going to support your application versus.
Right.
So.
I'm looking for the owner. Just give me 1 second.
Sure. Is there a discussion in the committee members? I'd like to hear everyone's opinion. We've been at this now for an hour, so I'd like to hear from the other committee members where they preferences for whether a deferral or proceeding with the application, seeing as though we're this late into the game. Mr. Charlebois, do you have any comments?
Madam Chair, actually two. Just so you know, I too would support the deferral. Mainly because of this confusion and because so much of our decision hinges on this idea that it'll be done in accordance with the plans. The second thing, though, that I did want to address was one of the, even though we're talking about a deferral, I still wanted to make a comment about my opinion with respect to the application and the comments about the size of the building on the lot and where it is. I can't speak for the other committee members here, but I'm just passing on to you, sir, that I'm looking at this building, I'm looking at the lot constraints that are on it, and I'm balancing your very, very valid comment about what the neighbors are going to look at on the other wall against the rights of of the landowners to be able to build something that fits on this rather peculiar site. And I just want you to know that when this does come back, unless there's any radical changes, I would be choosing to support, in this particular case, the applicant in terms of where he's siting his building, finding that I think he's done the very best that he possibly can, and the only other alternative would be to make the house so much smaller to accommodate you that I just have to pick one way or the other. Just wanted to pass that on.
I have to agree with Mr. Charlebois. I reiterate his comments. We exercised our ability and our knowledge to look at the application as a whole. And if Mr. Volt hadn't brought up this comment about the discrepancy in the drawings, I too would have supported the application given the constraints on the land. And I mean, I think you did a fabulous job with the presentation showing how everything is aligned. And I know from comments that staff has made that they are in full support of this application. They don't feel that there's any risk of the final permitted setback to be intruded upon. However, given the fact that we do have a small discrepancy in the drawings, as a committee, we need to be prudent because it's our job to approve or deny these applications, and we have to base them on such consistent drawings. So I too would support the deferral just for that technical mistake.
From what I've heard, I would support the deferral as well.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further comments? I see none. So all those in support of a deferral, and we'll get you back as soon as you bring in the papers, but she's got you down for October 2nd. All those in support of a deferral? Okay, we are all unanimously in support of your deferral. Thank you. And we appreciate the members of the public that have come in and have taken the time to be here and voice their concerns. The next application on our agenda, and the final one of the night, is CAV 103 2018 at 1345 Sheldon Avenue. Do you have anything to project? Okay, then just try and speak as loud as you can into the mic so we can hear you. There's not that many people still in the audience, so I'm hoping it'll be just us. Good evening. Your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Sam Pasquale.
I can't hear a thing going.
Sam Pasquale, 27 Gillespie, Toronto, Ontario. I was here July 10th. We deferred.
Sorry, we're really having a hard time.
Do you have a business card?
Maybe come to this side, and then when you need to project, we'll get you doing a little bit of a song and dance. I apologize for that. But it's really important that we have the recording and that we're able to hear your presentation.
Is this better?
That's absolutely better. Thank you.
My name is Sam Pasquale, 27 Gillespie, Toronto, Ontario.
Mr. Pasquale, right?
Pasquale,
Yes.
P-A-S-Q-U-A-L-E.
And your address?
27 Gillespie, G-I-L-L-E-S-P-I-E, Avenue, Toronto.
If you just give me a moment, I heard someone in the audience. Who is here for CAV 103 at 1345 Sheldon Avenue? Are you here in support or in opposition? You're in opposition. We do have one letter of support on file, but so Mr. Pasquale, I'll have you do your presentation, and then we'll invite the neighbors to address the committee.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Well, we're here for two, as I mentioned, we were deferred July 10th. I wanted to make an amendment, but that wasn't allowed. But we revised the drawings to work with the city. We're going for two variances under the bylaw RL 3-0, 6.41. The maximum gross floor area allowed is 41%, and we're asking for 41.98. I believe I left maybe about 30 examples of some decisions that were approved, 1% and over. I think I saw the highest is 15%. The second application, the second variance is section 646, is the maximum height is 9. We were asking for 9.9, and we were unsupported, so we revised the drawings to for a maximum height of 9.59. I have two decisions here that approved the maximum height was 9 meters for 1394 Lakeshore Road East, and 9.8 was approved. And I have another committee decision for 1570 Bernita Drive. The maximum height was 9, and they allowed 9.59, and that's how we came up with that. So,
Mr. Pasquale, if you can just comment on the reason for your variance as it pertains to the the development. That would be more helpful to us than listing other things that we've approved. We do not
I'll cut to the chase.
go by that. I'll just explain to you very quickly. We take every application on its own merit, and while we may look at the surrounding neighborhood to see what is there, it really, you have to speak to the application versus what was approved, because we'll have to pull up what was approved in order to see how we came about approving that.
Okay, that's fine. So we're asking for a 0.98% increase. They need that extra space. They're a growing family, and they have in-laws that will be living with them, so we're asking for that 0.98%. We're asking for height. Because the grade slopes up, and the way the city calculates the height, it calculates at the front property line, at the middle, vertical distance, and basically in the area, if you look at, for example, 1330 Tensley Drive, I'm going to show you a picture, and you can see it's almost a level property where ours is on a slope, and then behind our property, 1364 Waverly, there's maybe a 8-foot hill here. So I'm just going to show you this quickly on the other side and come back here, okay? Can I do that?
Place that down, I can zoom.
Oh, okay, perfect. Zoom in into this one here if you can. At the end of Sheldon, 1330 and 1334, the properties are pretty much level.
Is that the loudest that mic will go? Okay, thank you. Just give him a second, Mr. Pasquale.
Sure. Is this okay? Is this okay?
This is better.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the height is calculated from the center of the property line to vertical distance. You can see how this property is almost pretty much level, which ours is on a hill. But if you go behind, if you look at our map, how they circle the area, there's a map with the application that the city supplied. If you go to the back of our property, 1364, where it hits the radius that the city goes within that area, you can see that if you go to the center of the property line to this hill here, you can see that there's a variance of 8 feet. So from the end of Tensley to the end of Tensley, towards the north, you can see the grade starts to slope. It slopes from almost nothing here to about 8 feet at the back, and we're in between those two properties, and that's why we have a difference, I think 3 feet actually. So 3 feet is working against us. So I just want to show you that. So I'm going to go back to the microphone. I'll leave this here just in case you want to see it there. And also, we revised the front elevation. Just they had concern about massing, so we reduced the roof at this point here just to be subtle. So they were okay with this side here. This was the property line, so you can see it's 1 story and then going up. And they were concerned about the massing, so I dropped this roof here a little bit just to soften it up a little bit. And the city, I guess, was okay with it, and they supported it, basically.
Very well.
This is the subject property, and 1364 is that the one with the very high hill, and then Tensley is way over here, so you can see how it just slopes up, basically. And I think that's pretty much it, if you have any questions.
Okay, are there any questions of Mr. Pasquale at this time? I see none. Okay, we'll ask the neighbor to, that's okay. We'll just ask you to leave those drawings because we will remit them in record afterwards.
Sure, no problem.
Good evening, sir. Your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Rob McDougall, 1337 Sheldon. We actually have the adjoining driveway. I don't like to use the term objections. I was just going to question what are the plans for the split of the property on the driveway, just because I've seen a couple of examples, because our area is getting really developed now, and I just want to be assured that the substructure, whatever they're going to plan on doing, doesn't have my driveway fall in or anything like that, which has happened. So I'm just curious as to what you're doing.
So we'll get you that information. Is that the only question that you have?
Yeah, we have no problem. I actually talked to Robert, some fellow named Robert the other day. And I had no problems with what their plans were, but he didn't have an answer for me on the driveway as well.
Okay, we'll have that information. We'll have the applicant address that. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Pasquale. Hold on. It's important that he gets an answer to his question, so he needs to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Can you turn up the volume on the microphone, please? Because we're struggling here. Go ahead.
You ready to go? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. So this is the property line. I just wanted to highlight it. I marked it up here. This is shaded area is the driveway. And the driveway lines up with the house, and the house setback here is 1.298 millimeters, or 1.2 meters. And so it'll be in line with the property line. It will not interfere with the neighbor at any time. I think at the moment they do share a driveway, if I'm not mistaken, but that will be gone. So our property line is here, and the driveway, once again, is just set back from the property line.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Is there going to be some sort of treatment between the driveway and the property line?
Well, we're going to put grass here. Yeah, grass.
Okay.
Sod, of course, yes.
There's grass.
There won't be any asphalt.
Very well. Questions of Mr. Pasquale at this time? No, I see none. Sir, if you are satisfied and we can take this matter into committee, we are prepared to do so unless you have any further additions.
No, I'm fine. I think I presented my cases.
All right. I'm ready for a motion. Mr. Hardcastle, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having heard most of the presentations, and I think I followed what I had heard, having reviewed that, undertaken my site visit, and reviewed the staff report, I'm satisfied that the requested variances conform to the tests of the Act. I think that the grade differential from street edge to the midpoint of the property where the dwelling's proposed, and the effect on the established grade calculation is largely to blame, if you will, for the added height in the variance, the added variance height. So I will support the application, and that support will be subject to two conditions. The first being that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans as submitted. The second being that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued. I would note that we had received one letter of support, and we had heard some concerns from a resident, which I think has largely been addressed through the presentation of the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. Thank you, sir. Your application has been approved.
Thank you.
Yes. I apologize. I got sidetracked. We have minutes to approve, and it's the minutes for August the 21st. I was not present for that, but I'll be happy to take a motion. Mr. Hardcastle, moves minutes be... Okay, a motion to adjourn. Mr. Hardcastle moves to adjourn. Meeting adjourned.